If you're watching this on YouTube with a bowl of popcorn in your lap, wondering how bad a wedding has to go before the police and the state bar get involved, buckle up. My name is Camilla Harrison. I was 22 years old the day my family learned, in front of 300 witnesses, that I wasn't the quiet, compliant daughter they'd spent my whole life training me to be. It started in a hallway that smelled like roses and nerves. My father had me pinned against the wall outside the bridal suite, one hand braced near my shoulder, the other waving a scholarship contract like it was a weapon. His face was inches from mine, breath hot, cologne thick enough to choke on. "You will smile," he hissed, voice low and lethal. "You will be a bridesmaid, and you will give the speech Sarah wrote for you. Word for word, Camilla. Do you understand me?" Behind him, through the half-open door, I could see my sister Sarah in her pristine white gown, laughing with her bridesmaids. Her hand rested protectively over her barely visible baby bump, the same hand that, 2 years ago, had texted my boyfriend Jake photos that shattered my future. Jake's baby. The phrase still made my stomach rebel. I had loved him for 3 years. I'd brought him home for holidays, watched him sit at our dining table while my parents praised his ambition and talked about when, not if, he made partner at my father's firm. We'd lain in my dorm room planning a life together. Law school, our own wedding, the apartment with the tiny balcony where we'd drink cheap wine and pretend it was expensive. Then Sarah decided she wanted him. And in my family, what Sarah wanted, Sarah got. "If you ruin this day," my father said, voice dropping even lower, "I cancel your scholarship tomorrow. You can forget law school. You can forget everything we've done for you." I almost laughed at that. Everything we've done for you, but my chest was too tight. For 22 years, his glare had worked. Be good. Be quiet. Be invisible next to your golden sister. That was the unspoken family rule. But I wasn't the same girl anymore. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he snapped. I did, and for the first time, I think, he saw something that actually unnerved him. Not tears, not fear, just calculation. Because 6 months earlier, when I'd first stumbled across Jake's messages to Sarah, I'd made a folder in my phone and labeled it insurance. Screenshots, exports, backups to the cloud. Not just of Jake calling me pathetic and boring or describing my sister's body in disgusting detail, but of something else. Little breadcrumbs of academic fraud. Name-dropping my father. Name-dropping Dean Robert Mitchell, Jake's godfather, and the dean of the law school I'd idolized since I was 16. They thought I was emotional and unstable. They didn't realize I was documenting. "I understand perfectly, Dad," I said, sliding my clutch open and brushing my fingers over my phone. "I'll be the perfect bridesmaid. I'll smile for every photo, and I'll give a speech everyone will remember." Something flickered in his eyes at my tone, suspicion. But the priest was already calling the wedding party to line up, and Sarah was squealing about how the light was perfect for photos, and there were 300 wealthy guests waiting to see the Harrison family's golden daughter marry her stolen prize. He didn't have time to interrogate the calm in my voice. Inside the chapel, everything looked like Sarah's Pinterest boards had come to life. Crystal chandeliers dripped from vaulted ceilings. White roses cascaded down every column, every pew, every available surface. Soft string music floated through the air, trying desperately to gloss over the tension humming underneath my skin. I stood at the altar in the pale pink bridesmaid dress Sarah had chosen specifically because it washed out my complexion. The bouquet in my hands matched hers exactly. Same peonies, same delicate ribbon, because God forbid anything about me stand out. My father sat in the front row beside my mother, his eyes on me like twin laser sights. Be good, be quiet, be invisible. Jake stood at the other end of the aisle in a custom tuxedo he'd once described to me. Something classic, he'd said, fingers tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder as we lay tangled in my dorm bed. Nothing too flashy, just us and the people we love. Now he smiled at Sarah like she was the only person in the room. Like I'd never existed, like 3 years of my life were nothing but a stepping stone on his way to better connections. The priest's voice droned on about love, commitment, and forever. The words tasted like ash. I let my eyes drift over the guests instead. There was Dean Mitchell, 3 rows back on the groom's side, tall and distinguished, watching the ceremony with the faint, bored smile of a man who'd attended too many expensive weddings. My father had talked about him for years, reverently. The dean, the gatekeeper, the person who could make or break a legal career with a single recommendation. Jake had used his name like currency. On the bride's side, my mother sat rigid, pearls glowing at her throat, eyes shining with the triumph of a woman who'd orchestrated the perfect social event. Beside her, my former best friend Emma stood near the altar, fixing the veil with trembling hands, her eyes darting between Sarah and me like she wanted to be anywhere else. She knows, I thought. She's known for a long time. And now, the priest said, smiling beatifically, if anyone here knows of a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was thick and expectant. Tradition said no one ever spoke. My father's stare burned into the side of my face, a silent command. Be good. I reached into my clutch and felt the cool, familiar weight of my phone. Be quiet. I rose to my feet. Be invisible. I object, I said, my voice carrying clear and sharp through the chapel. For half a second, no one moved. Even the string quartet faltered, the music dying mid-note. Then 300 heads turned toward me in unison. I could feel my father's fury like a physical force. My mother's hand shot out, clutching his arm. Sarah's smile froze on her face, cracking like cheap porcelain. Jake blinked, as if he couldn't quite process that the script had suddenly changed. I stepped into the aisle, phone already unlocked, the insurance folder glowing on the screen. My name is Camilla Harrison, I said, every word precise, and I have some messages to share before this union is finalized. Jake lunged forward. Camilla, what are you? I held up a hand. Don't worry, Jake. I'll let your own words do the talking. I opened the first screenshot and began to read, my voice steady as a scalpel. Can't believe Camilla actually thinks I care about her. The only reason I'm with her is because Harrison money opens doors. Once I'm established in her dad's firm, I'll upgrade to someone worth the effort. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a physical wave. Sarah went white, then red. Jake tried to move toward me, but two groomsmen instinctively grabbed his arms. The priest stood frozen, Bible half raised, eyes wide. I scrolled. Dated 3 months into our relationship, I said, making sure my voice carried to every corner of the room. From Jake to his best friend. Sarah's the hot one anyway. Camilla's just convenient. Good grades, quiet, won't make waves when I need to focus on my career. Her dad already promised me a position after graduation. My father shot to his feet. That's enough, he barked. Sit down, Camilla, now. Funny you mentioned graduation, Dad, I said sweetly, my thumb flicking to the next screenshot. Because it's relevant. I turned slightly, angling my voice toward Dean Mitchell. Dean Mitchell, I called. I'm so sorry to drag you into this, but since your name appears in multiple messages about academic integrity, I thought you might want to hear them. His expression sharpened, boredom gone. I read, Mitchell's recommendation letter is basically guaranteed now that I'm dating his godson's future sister-in-law. Camilla's family connections are the only thing she's good for. Silence, then a low murmur. Dean Mitchell's jaw tightened. He glanced at Jake, then at my father. Those are fake! Sarah finally found her voice, shrill and wobbling. She's jealous because Jake chose me. She's always been unstable. I scrolled to the next set of messages. These were between Jake and Sarah. Your sister is so boring in bed, I read. Can't wait to see what you're like. My mother made a strangled noise. Camilla never deserved you anyway, I continued, my fingers steady even as my heart pounded. She's always been the disappointing daughter. Mom and Dad will get over it once they see how happy we are. I looked up, straight at my parents. My father's face had gone from furious red to a mottled purple. My mother's lips trembled, her eyes brimming with tears she hadn't bothered to shed for me 2 years ago. And here's my favorite, I said softly, scrolling to the message I'd saved for last. 6 months ago. Told Camilla I got Sarah pregnant by accident, Jake writes. Truth is, we planned it. Sarah said once there's a baby, the Harrisons will have to accept us completely. They'll cut Camilla off before they let their grandchild suffer. You could have heard a pin drop. Then chairs scraped, whispers turned to open outrage. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," and half the guests pulled out their phones in open, unapologetic recording mode. I walked down the aisle toward Dean Mitchell, my pink heels clicking against marble, the sound rhythmic and oddly calming. Dean Mitchell, I said when I reached him, offering my phone. These messages also mention using your name to influence faculty recommendations and admissions decisions. They reference buying exam answers, plagiarized thesis work, several instances of academic fraud. He took the phone, hands very steady. He scrolled. With each swipe, his face grew colder. After a long moment, he straightened and faced the room, voice carrying like a gavel. These messages reference at least 4 instances of academic fraud, he said. including falsified letters of recommendation, purchased exam answers, and plagiarism. Mr. Martinez, you are expelled, effective immediately. I will be contacting the State Bar Association and the University Board. Jake's mother burst into tears. His father swore under his breath. Jake himself thrashed against the groomsmen holding him, shouting about privacy and manipulation, but nobody moved to help him. Then Dean Mitchell turned to me. "Miss Harrison," he said, his expression shifting, still stern but softer at the edges. "I remember your application from 2 years ago. Perfect GPA, excellent recommendations, extensive volunteer work. We rejected you because we had already accepted Mr. Martinez, based on what I now know was a fraudulent application." All eyes swung to my father. My father, who had forced me to attend a smaller, more expensive school, who'd made me work 3 jobs while he paid for Sarah's luxury apartment, who had waved a $30,000 scholarship in my face that morning, like a leash. "I would like to offer you a full scholarship to our law program," Dean Mitchell continued, "including a stipend for living expenses and a guaranteed position in our honors program. We made an error in judgment. I'd like to correct it." There it was, my father's world cracking, my world opening. 300 people watched as I stood in the center aisle of what was supposed to be my sister's fairy tale wedding and accepted the future I'd earned years ago. "I'd be honored," I said, my voice clear, steady, amplified by every phone recording in the room. Sarah collapsed into her maid of honor's arms, wailing. Jake was being pulled toward the exit by security. My mother stared at me like she didn't recognize the daughter standing there. And my father stood in his custom tuxedo, scholarship contract limp in his hand, realizing that the daughter he'd spent 22 years underestimating had just set his empire on fire with nothing but the truth. It was the moment everything changed. For all of us, the wedding never really ended. It just mutated. One minute, the chapel was full of music and flowers and curated happiness. The next, it felt like a crime scene with better lighting. They never made it to, "You may now kiss the bride." There was no first dance, no romantic slow-motion walk back down the aisle. Security escorted Jake out a side door, while guests whispered furiously and pretended not to film. Sarah was hustled to the bridal suite, sobbing, mascara streaked down her cheeks like war paint. I slipped out of the chapel while everyone else was still arguing about who was to blame. The reception hall, already set up and glowing, looked obscene. 5-tier cake, tables covered in white linen and crystal glassware, centerpieces tall enough to block eye contact, thousands of dollars in flowers already wilting under the air conditioning. Waiters stood along the walls with trays of champagne, unsure whether to serve or retreat. My father was at the bar, deep in conversation with the venue manager. His jaw was clenched. His shoulders, usually straight and confident, were hunched. "I understand your position, Mr. Harrison," the manager was saying, professional smile stretched tight. "But the contract specifies full payment upon completion of the ceremony, which, technically, it was completed," my father snapped. They exchanged vows. "Technically," the manager repeated, gesturing subtly toward the room where guests still milled about in confusion, "we now have a public scandal, a disrupted event, and a trending hashtag attached to our venue's name." I watched from a distance, unseen. Old habit. My father pulled out his wallet. His hand shook. That got my attention. This was a man who had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts without blinking, who'd told me, my entire life, that money was a tool he wielded better than anyone. Now his fingers fumbled over his credit card, a sheen of sweat glistening at his hairline. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was fear. A flash of satisfaction flared in my chest. Camilla. I turned. Emma stood near the gift table, clutching her bouquet so hard the stems were bending. Her bridesmaid dress matched mine, the same humiliating shade of pink, but her face looked like she'd aged 5 years since this morning. Her eyes were red, not from the wedding. From guilt. "I wanted to tell you so many times," she whispered, glancing around like Sarah might appear out of nowhere and yank her away. "I swear to you, I tried. Sarah made me promise. She said it would destroy the family if you knew the whole truth." "The family was already destroyed," I said, voice flat. "I just made it visible." She winced. "You're right." Her hands shook as she dug into her clutch and pulled out a small black USB drive. "I copied her files last night," Emma said, pressing it into my palm like it was a live grenade. "Sarah keeps a journal on her laptop. Everything. How she seduced Jake. How she convinced your parents you were too unstable for law school. how she got Jake to sabotage your original application to Dean Mitchell's university. For a heartbeat, the room went blurry around the edges. I had suspected. I hadn't known. My fingers closed around the drive. Why now? I asked. Emma swallowed. Because watching you stand up in that chapel, I couldn't let you keep fighting blind while everyone else lied. Tears spilled over again. I'm so sorry, Camilla. I was a coward. No, I said quietly. You were loyal. To the wrong person. Now you get to decide who you want to be loyal to going forward. She inhaled a shaky breath, nodding. Across the room, relatives argued in hushed, furious tones. The string quartet had packed up and left. A waiter hovered nearby, unsure whether he should offer me champagne or condolences. I'll text you later, I told Emma, tucking the flash drive into my clutch next to my phone. Insurance on top of insurance. Go home. You don't owe Sarah another second of today. Neither do you, she said. She was right. I walked toward the exit, my heels echoing in the cavernous, half-lit reception hall, passing tables that would never be sat at, a cake that would never be cut, and party favors no one would take home. By the time I slid into the back seat of the rideshare, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. Notifications, unknown numbers, social media tags. I turned it off. For one night, I let myself sleep. The next morning, I woke up to 73 missed calls and 216 text messages. Apparently, the internet had not slept. Someone had uploaded a full video of my objection to 3 platforms before the reception had even officially been canceled. Hashtags like #messages from hell, #scholarship revenge, and #wedding from Harrison were trending. Random accounts had slowed the video down, added dramatic music, dissected every facial expression. People I'd never met were arguing in comment sections about whether I was a hero or a monster. 3 news outlets had emailed me requesting interviews about academic fraud, privilege, and family manipulation. I was still processing that when my bedroom door burst open. My father stood there in yesterday's wrinkled tuxedo pants and a dress shirt with the top buttons undone. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. We need to contain this, he said without preamble. Good morning to you too, I said, not looking up from my laptop. I had already opened the transfer application for Dean Mitchell's university and started filling it out. This isn't a joke, Camilla, he snapped. Dean Mitchell is threatening to pull all university contracts. The state bar is opening an investigation. Your mother's charity board is demanding her resignation. Sarah won't stop crying. You need to make a statement saying those messages were fabricated. I turned slowly in my desk chair, really taking him in. Bloodshot eyes, jaw still clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. For the first time in my life, he wasn't the one holding the power in the room. No, I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Excuse me? I said no. I folded my hands in my lap. I'm not lying to protect Jake or Sarah or you. His face darkened. Camilla, I know we've had our differences, but this affects the entire family. Your future siblings, your cousins, everyone who depends on Harrison and Associates for employment. You can't just... I can, I interrupted, and I will. His mouth snapped shut. I swiveled my laptop around so he could see the screen. Jasmine had come through for me while I slept. My email pinged at 2 a.m. with secured files and a neatly organized summary. Did you know, I said calmly, that over the past 4 years, you've spent $412,000 on Sarah's education, living expenses, and lifestyle? His eyes flicked to the numbers on the screen. His expression faltered. Luxury apartment, international vacations, private tutoring, designer wardrobes, I continued, all while telling me we couldn't afford for me to go to Dean Mitchell's school. I clicked to the next tab. And in that same period, I received a grand total of $37,000 in scholarship support, most of which came with strings attached, like being forced to stand up at my sister's wedding and pretend none of this happened. That's not... And then there are these, I said, clicking again. Emails. His name, Dean Mitchell's name. Subject lines like, Re-applicant Camilla Harrison, concerns. I read aloud. As her father, I feel obligated to be honest about Camilla's emotional instability. She is prone to dramatic episodes and may not be suited for the rigor of your program. I looked up, meeting his eyes. I've never seen a therapist, Dad. There's no record of any mental health evaluation. No diagnosis, nothing. You just lied to protect Sarah's narrative. He went pale. Where did you get those emails? Emma, I said simply, your golden daughter's maid of honor has been documenting everything for the past year because even she couldn't stomach the lies anymore. I let that sink in. She has recordings too, by the way, I added. Voice memos of Sarah bragging about seducing Jake, about convincing you I was unstable, about planning the pregnancy as a way to lock down the Harrison money. I pulled the small flash drive from my desk drawer and placed it on the table between us. Would you like to hear them? I asked. Or should we skip ahead to the part where you decide whether to negotiate with me or watch me give all of this to every news outlet currently filling my inbox? For 22 years, my father had held power over me with money and fear. In that moment, I watched him realize that balance had shifted. What do you want? He asked finally, voice rough. Nothing from you, I said, and meant it. I want you to leave me alone. No more calls, no more manipulation, no more threats. I'm transferring to Dean Mitchell's school in 6 weeks, and you're going to stay out of my life completely. His eyes widened. I am still your father. And you're going to tell everyone who asks that you support my decision, I continued over him, that you're proud of me, and that the Harrison family wishes me well. Otherwise, those emails and recordings go to the state bar, the IRS, and every journalist currently begging me for a quote. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman sitting at her cheap desk in a childhood bedroom that hadn't been redecorated since I was 16. The disappointing daughter who'd just flipped the script. My mother appeared in the doorway behind him, eyes red, makeup smeared. You would destroy your own family? She whispered. Sarah is pregnant and alone. Jake's gone. Your father might lose everything. And you're negotiating? I'm telling the truth, I said. If the truth destroys this family, that's not my fault. Her expression hardened. You didn't have to expose it publicly. You humiliated us. The humiliation isn't the problem, I said. The fraud is. Before either of them could respond, the doorbell rang downstairs. We all froze. My father recovered first, turning away with a muttered, "We're not done here." He stalked down the hall, his footsteps heavy on the wooden stairs. Through the thin walls of our house, I heard the muffled murmur of voices, then the deeper, formal tone of a stranger. Looking for Jacob Martinez. Is he here? My father said something I couldn't make out. My pulse quickened, a dark, cold anticipation sliding through me. I stood and walked to the top of the stairs. 2 uniformed police officers stood in our foyer. One held a folder, the other scanned the house with practiced detachment. He doesn't live here, I said before my father could lie. Not anymore. His former fiancée, Sarah Harrison, is at my grandmother's in Florida, but she may know where he is. Both officers looked up at me. The taller one nodded. We have a warrant for his arrest on charges of academic fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The university filed the complaint this morning. We've also been informed you have evidence related to these charges. I descended the stairs slowly, feeling my parents' eyes burning into my back. Yes, I said, holding out my phone. Everything's documented. Messages where he discusses forging recommendation letters, bribing teaching assistants, and using my family's connections to secure internships he wasn't qualified for. The officer took my phone, scrolling through the insurance folder with a growing frown. There's also evidence that my sister, Sarah Harrison, may have knowingly assisted in some of this, I added, my voice steady. She helped him prepare false application materials, provided access to my father's law firm resources. My mother gasped, Camila, you can't, she's pregnant. Being pregnant doesn't erase crimes, I said, without looking at her. The shorter officer scribbled something in his notebook. We'll need to speak with her, he said, and we'll likely need copies of everything you have. No problem, I replied. I have backups. As the officers thanked me and stepped back outside to make calls and arrange next steps, my father stared at me, face drained of color. This is going to destroy us, he whispered. I thought about Sarah's immaculate white dress, torn at the hem as she had tried to chase Jake out of the chapel. About my mother hissing at me that I had ruined everything, as if everything hadn't been rotten for years. Yes, I said softly, it is. I met his eyes. But you built it this way. The house felt smaller after the police left, like the walls had absorbed the shock and were now pressing inward. My father stood rigidly in the foyer, staring at the door as if sheer will could undo everything that had just happened. He wasn't used to losing control. He especially wasn't used to me being the reason. But the real unraveling hadn't even begun. The barrel rolls downhill. It started with a phone call. Not to me. This one went to my father. I only heard his side of it, but that was enough to understand the magnitude. What do you mean terminated immediately? No, there must be some misunderstanding. After 30 years, you can't... Please, just wait. Let's discuss this. His voice cracked. I had never, in 22 years, heard my father's voice crack. When he finally hung up, he leaned heavily on the banister like the house itself had tilted. My mother rushed to him, panic flooding her face. What happened? He didn't answer her. He looked at me. Not with anger, not with confusion, with realization. and the kind of fear that made my stomach go cold. "Dean Mitchell," he said, the words grinding out like broken glass. "He's pulling all 3 university contracts. $2 million a year. Gone." My mother sucked in a sharp breath, hand flying to her mouth. My father sank onto the bottom stair, elbows on his knees, hands over his face. I expected satisfaction. What I felt instead was nothing. Not numbness, not relief, just a hollow neutrality, like watching the end of a movie I'd already predicted. Because deep down, I knew something they were only now beginning to understand. You can't build a family on favoritism, lies, and fraud and expect it not to collapse. Not forever, when the world keeps getting louder. By noon, the wedding of the year had evolved into the scandal of the week. My phone, which I'd turned back on because at this point, chaos had a schedule and I didn't, flooded with news alerts, social media mentions, requests for interviews, hashtags trending globally, comment sections spiraling into think pieces. People online debated. Was I a hero? Was I cruel? Did Sarah deserve it? Was Jake truly the mastermind or just another manipulator? How corrupt was my family exactly? No one could agree. Everyone had an opinion. But none of it mattered, because the real battlefield wasn't on TikTok or Twitter. It was right here, in my childhood home. An unexpected visitor. Around 3 p.m., the doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't police. It was Dean Mitchell, in person. My father actually stumbled backward when he saw him standing on our porch in a tailor-made charcoal suit, an expression like carved stone. "Dean, Robert, I can explain." "No," Dean Mitchell said calmly. "You can't." He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. My father looked like he might faint. I came downstairs, drawn by the tension humming through the air like static. When Dean Mitchell saw me, something softened in his stern face. "Miss Harrison," he said with a respectful nod, "I wanted to speak with you personally about the offer I extended during the ceremony." My mother let out a strangled noise at the word ceremony, as if the wedding still held some sacred meaning. I nodded. Of course. "I meant every word," Dean Mitchell continued. "Your academic record is superb. Your integrity, given everything you've endured, is commendable, and your public composure under extraordinary pressure." He exhaled, almost amazed. "Frankly, most adults I know would have collapsed. You didn't." My father tried to interject. "Dean Mitchell, I think you've been misled." Mitchell silenced him with a single raised hand. "To be clear," he said, turning fully toward my father, "I am here because your daughter deserves justice, and because the lies you fed my admissions team constitute grounds for formal ethics complaints." My father paled. My mother swayed slightly, but the dean wasn't finished. "I've filed preliminary reports with the state bar," he said. "If the investigation confirms your participation in academic fraud, you will face disciplinary action. A beat, possibly suspension." My father's knees buckled. He braced himself on the wall. My mother gasped as if she'd been stabbed. Dean Mitchell then turned to me again, offering his business card with quiet dignity. "Please contact my office tomorrow. We'll finalize your scholarship, housing, stipend, and expedited transfer plans." I took the card. My hand didn't shake. His eyes met mine. "You deserve better than this," he said softly. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then he left, leaving only silence and the sound of my parents' world cracking open. Sarah's world comes crashing down. By evening, Sarah had returned from being questioned by police. My grandmother had driven her back from the station. Her white dress was wrinkled, eyes swollen, mascara crusted on her cheeks. She looked small. For the first time in her life, she barely made it 2 steps into the foyer before collapsing into tears. "I didn't know. He said he loved me. He told me Camilla was crazy. He promised we would be a family." I watched her without flinching. She cried harder at that. "You ruined my life," she sobbed. "Everything is ruined because of you." I said nothing. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. My sister had never understood consequences. Now she was meeting them for the first time. The night I packed. By midnight, the house was quiet. My father was in his study, door shut, staring at financial documents as if sheer concentration could change reality. My mother paced the hallway clutching her phone, whispering frantic excuses to her charity board. Sarah cried herself to sleep in the guest room, and I packed. Not a lot. Just enough to get me through 6 weeks until the spring semester began at my new school. Clothes, laptop, files, the flash drive from Emma, my phone with the insurance folder. When I zipped the suitcase shut, something inside me settled. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. A clean, precise cut. As I slipped downstairs, suitcase in hand, my father emerged from his study. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Camilla," he said, voice hoarse. Where are you going? Away, I said simply. His voice cracked again. You're abandoning your family? No, I said. You abandoned me years ago. I'm just done waiting for that to change. He stepped forward. Camilla, please, we can fix this. You can't fix what you broke on purpose, I said, and I'm not responsible for rebuilding it. He froze, because he knew it was true. I rolled my suitcase toward the door. Don't do this, he whispered. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I already did, I said, and walked out. The air outside was cold, clean. When my rideshare pulled up, I got in without looking back. My phone buzzed in my lap, a final notification before I silenced it for the night. Breaking news. Law student Jake Martinez arrested for fraud and identity theft. Investigation expands. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The fall had begun, and for the first time in my life, it wasn't me at the bottom. The first week after I left home felt surreal, like stepping out of a burning house and realizing the air was still breathable. I stayed in a quiet, month-to-month apartment near Dean Mitchell's University, the kind of place with beige walls, humming radiators, and neighbors who didn't make eye contact in the hallway. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, everything was mine. My schedule, my decisions, my peace. And the silence, God, the silence, felt like freedom. The investigation explodes. 2 days after I moved, the Bar Association formally opened an inquiry into my father. 3 days later, Harrison and Associates lost another client. By the end of the week, 5 prestigious companies had publicly severed ties. The local paper called the developing situation the Harrison Collapse, complete with an infographic showing timelines and relationships like we were characters in a true crime documentary. My mother went silent on social media. Sarah deleted her accounts entirely. Jake was front page news for all the wrong reasons. His mugshot circulated everywhere, jaw clenched, eyes hollow, still trying to look superior, even as the walls closed in. Comment sections were savage. And the academic fraud investigation widened. What started with Jake became a domino chain. 12 students under review, 3 professors suspended, 2 admissions counselors implicated, multiple law firms distancing themselves. Dean Mitchell became a public figure practically overnight, giving measured statements about ethics, academic integrity, and the courage of one student to expose systemic abuse. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. People connected the dots. My email inbox filled with messages from strangers who said I'd inspired them. Others called me a vengeful witch. Some wanted to know if I was single. The world had opinions. I ignored them all. I went to class. I studied. I worked. I built a life out of the ashes of a family that had never made room for me. The visitors I refused to see. My parents tried contacting me more times than I could count. 3 calls from my mother, 9 from my father, 2 knocks on my apartment door, 1 surprise appearance at the university library. I slipped out the back before they saw me. Their voicemails ranged from begging to bargaining to emotional blackmail. Camilla, sweetheart, your father is under so much stress. Please help us. We're still a family. Families fix things. You don't understand what's at stake for us. For us, never for me. I blocked every number. Changed my door access code. Told the university to add my information to their privacy protection list. And every time I took another step away from them, something in my chest loosened. Sarah's downfall. Updates about Sarah came in directly, most through Emma, who reached out tentatively with remorse woven into every message. Sarah had accepted a plea deal as an accessory to fraud. No jail because she was pregnant, but permanent career damage. She moved to Florida to live with our grandmother, where community gossip eventually outran even the speed of social media. People point at her in the grocery store, Emma wrote once. She says it's like being radioactive. I didn't reply. Not out of malice. Out of prioritizing my oxygen first. Law school. The life I deserved all along. Dean Mitchell's University was everything my father had claimed I wasn't ready for. Demanding, relentless, unforgiving. And I thrived. I earned top marks, joined the moot court team, became a research assistant for a professor who terrified half the department but adored my precision. Classmates who had watched my viral video approached me gently, some curious, some supportive, some intimidated. I didn't indulge any of them. I wasn't there for attention. I was there to rewrite my life. 3 years later, I graduated summa cum laude, top 5 of my class. 6 law firms sent recruiters. 2 flew me across the country. 1 offered me a signing bonus bigger than my parents' annual mortgage. I took a position in Manhattan, 19th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of office where you could watch thunderstorms sweep across the skyline. At 26, I had built the life that had been denied to me. At 28, I made senior associate. At 30, I made partner, the youngest in the firm's history. My success was quiet, sharp, deliberate. A series of choices made with surgical precision. A life built on merit, not manipulation. The opposite of how my sister had lived. The opposite of how my parents had raised us. And then the email arrived. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that disappears into memory. Morning coffee, client meetings, contract revision, a partner luncheon. I returned to my office after a deposition prep session, loosened my blazer, and refreshed my inbox. One new message, no preview text, no sender name I recognized. Subject, urgent. Sarah Harrison, medical emergency. For a moment, my body forgot how to breathe. I clicked it open. A hospital social worker from Tampa General Hospital explained, brief, clinical, factual, that Sarah had been admitted with complications from what appeared to be stage 3 cervical cancer. Treatment would be aggressive, painful, expensive. Our grandmother was 86 and struggling. Our parents were working entry-level jobs, bankrupt in every meaningful sense. Sarah's 8-year-old son, my nephew, whom I had never met, was at risk of entering foster care if no stable guardian stepped up. The email ended with, "Given the family situation, we are reaching out to any relatives who might be able to assist." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then another. Then another. Slowly, I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the Manhattan skyline. I didn't feel anger, or triumph, or even grief. Just a shifting weight inside my chest. Because this wasn't about Sarah, not anymore. This was about a child. A child who had no part in the schemes, betrayals, or lies that had spiraled through our family like poison. A child who was about to lose the only parent he had. And I, whether I wanted it or not, was the only person in the Harrison lineage with the resources to help. A fact that felt heavy, inescapable, unfair in a way I couldn't articulate. I didn't respond to the email that day. I didn't sleep that night. But by morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not because they deserved it, but because he did. 2 days after the email, I boarded a flight to Tampa. No one knew. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not my parents. This wasn't a family visit, it was a negotiation. The hospital conference room smelled like antiseptic and lemon-scented cleaner, cold enough to make goosebumps rise on my arms. I wore a charcoal suit, my armor, hair pinned back, expression neutral. I'd faced judges with less intimidation in my eyes. Sarah was wheeled in by a nurse. I didn't recognize her at first. She was thinner, hair limp and brittle, cheekbones too sharp, eyes sunken from weeks of unmanaged pain. A scarf covered her head. She held her hands tightly together, knuckles white. Behind her, my grandmother shuffled in slowly, body frail, face lined far deeper than I remembered. When Sarah finally realized it was me standing there, something flickered. Hope, fear, shame, tangled into one expression. "Camilla," she whispered, voice cracking. I can't believe you came." I didn't sit, didn't soften, didn't step closer. "I'm here for one reason," I said. "Your son." Her face crumpled. Tears welled instantly. My grandmother reached out a trembling hand. "Sweetheart, please. She's dying. We don't have the resources. The boy, he'll..." I raised a hand, stopping her. "I'm not here to discuss the past," I said crisply, "or forgiveness, or family reunions. I'm here to outline the terms under which I will pay for your treatment." Sarah blinked. "Terms?" "Yes," I said, placing a set of legal documents on the table. 20 pages, ironclad, drafted overnight by 3 senior associates at my firm. "Read them carefully." Her hands shook as she picked up the first page. "The terms of our salvation and separation." I spoke while she read. "My funding is conditional on 4 requirements." Her eyes lifted, already brimming. "First," I said, "you acknowledge, legally and in writing, everything you did 8 years ago. The fraud, the lies, the manipulation, all of it." My grandmother gasped softly. Sarah swallowed hard, face going white. Second, she whispered, voice trembling. "Second," I continued, "this creates a permanent, court-enforceable, no-contact order. You will not reach out to me for any reason unrelated to medical updates, which will be sent only through your assigned social worker." Sarah flinched, like the words were physical blows. "Third," I continued, "if you recover, you commit to being honest with your son about why I'm not in your life. No scapegoating, no villainizing. You tell him the truth. Sarah choked on a breath. Camilla, please. And finally, I said, this is a one-time arrangement. You will never ask me for anything again. Money, help, involvement. When your treatment is done, our relationship ends permanently. Silence. Only the hum of hospital ventilation filled the room. After a moment, Sarah whispered, You really hate me that much? I looked at her for a long, still moment. I don't hate you, I said quietly. I don't feel anything about you anymore. You made sure of that years ago. Her face collapsed in on itself. My grandmother sobbed softly into a tissue. But, I added, your son deserves a mother, and I won't punish an innocent child for your choices. Sarah covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, she cried. For everything. For Jake. For the messages. For lying. For... I cut her off gently. This is not about apologies. This is a contract. You sign it or you don't. The choice is yours. It took her 4 minutes to sign. My grandmother witnessed. A hospital administrator notarized. The documents were scanned and stored in my secure cloud before Sarah even lifted the pen from the final signature line. And just like that, I saved her life, without letting her back into mine. The treatment begins. I established a medical trust that same afternoon, fully funded, legally protected. Surgery came first, then chemo, then radiation. A brutal, unforgiving cycle. I didn't visit, didn't hold her hand, didn't sit in waiting rooms. Instead, every Monday, I received a clinical update from Patricia, the social worker. Week 1, surgery successful but complicated. Week 3, severe nausea, weight loss, requires feeding assistance. Week 7, tumor markers decreasing. Week 12, infection, hospitalized. Week 20, responding well to treatment. Good prognosis. I read every update like it was a case brief, thoroughly, but with emotional distance. My concern wasn't for Sarah. It was for the little boy who still had a chance at a normal life. The first time I saw his face, one evening, 6 months into treatment, Patricia attached a photo to her update. Thought you should see how well Jackson is coping, she wrote. In the photo, my nephew stood in a school parking lot holding a science fair ribbon. His shirt was too big, his shoes a bit worn, but he wore a shy, proud smile. He had Sarah's eyes, he had my jawline, and something else, something I couldn't name. The picture stayed open on my screen for a long time. Remission. 18 months after I signed the papers, Patricia called. Camilla, the scans came back. Sarah is officially in remission. I exhaled slowly, surprised by the tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That's good, I said. She wants to thank you, Patricia added gently. She's written letters. I've kept them per your directive, but she wants you to know she's grateful and keeping her promises. Good, I repeated. Please continue the 6-month medical updates. And nothing else? Nothing else. But we weren't done. Not quite. The email that got through my walls. 6 months later, I arrived at my office for another ordinary Tuesday. I opened my inbox. There it was. An email from a name I didn't recognize. Subject, thank you, Aunt Camilla. My heart, traitorous, soft, unguarded, shifted. I clicked it open. It was from Jackson, 9 years old. Typed perfectly, no emojis, no childish misspellings. Dear Aunt Camilla, my mom told me what you did. She said you saved her life even though she hurt you very bad a long time ago. She said you have every right not to talk to us and I respect that. But I wanted to say thank you anyway. You gave me my mom back. I know I'll probably never meet you, but I won't forget what you did. I hope you're happy and successful. You look like you are from pictures online. Respectfully, Jackson Martinez Harrison. I read it once, twice, a third time. Something in me cracked, not open, but sideways, a hairline fracture letting in an angle of light I hadn't expected. He wasn't entitled, he wasn't demanding, he wasn't asking for a relationship. He was just grateful, purely, sincerely grateful. I typed a short reply. Jackson, your mother made many mistakes, but having you wasn't one of them. Work hard, be kind to people who earn it. And remember, your worth isn't defined by your parents' choices. Camilla. I never heard from him again. But sometimes, late at night, I found myself opening that email. Not because I regretted anything, but because I finally understood some goodness survives even the worst families. And sometimes you save a life not because someone deserves it, but because someone innocent needs you to. Time has a strange way of smoothing even the sharpest edges, but it never erases them. I didn't see my parents again. I didn't see Sarah again. I didn't respond to letters, voicemails, holiday cards, desperate apologies, or guilt-laced messages. I kept my boundaries like a fortress, not out of hatred, out of self-respect. What they broke beyond repair. But life, my life, moved forward. The years that followed, my father. 2 months after Jackson's email, I received a brief notice from the state bar. License suspended, 1 year. $50,000 ethics violation fine. Harrison and Associates closed permanently. My father, who once strutted through courtrooms like a king, took a job as a paralegal making $40,000 a year. A job he had always said was for people who lack ambition. He looked small in the one blurry photo I later found online. Older, defeated, human. But none of it changed the past. None of it rebuilt what he burned. I didn't reach out. My mother's life collapsed even faster. She resigned from every charity board. Her social circle vanished. The country club politely suggested she suspend her membership. Her identity, built entirely on status, dissolved. She sent 2 long emails begging for reconciliation. I deleted both without opening them. She once told me that family reputation is everything. Now she finally understood what it felt like to lose it. I didn't reach out. Sarah stayed in Florida with our grandmother. Remission was stable. She worked retail jobs, raised her son alone, lived quietly. No more social climbing, no more pretending to be the golden child. Her world shrank to something small, stripped of privilege. And maybe for the first time in her life, she became a real person instead of a performance. But I kept my promise. No contact. Not even when she sent her medical updates with notes scribbled at the bottom like, "Thank you again. I'm trying every day. He's doing well in school." I read the updates. I ignored the notes. I moved on. Jackson. I didn't hear from Jackson again for years. But I looked him up sometimes. Not obsessively. Just quietly. Enough to know that he earned straight A's. He joined debate team. He won a regional science competition. He earned a scholarship to a private high school. He grew into a serious, thoughtful-looking teenager. And every time a photo popped up with him smiling nervously into a camera, something warm flickered in my chest. It wasn't maternal, wasn't sentimental, just human. He was the one branch of the Harrison family tree untouched by rot. My own life. By 32, I was a senior partner. By 38, I was the youngest executive partner in my firm's history. By 40, I was mentoring law students the way I wished someone had mentored me. I lived alone in a Manhattan apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that sparkled at night. I traveled when I wanted. I dated when I had time. I built friendships with people who valued truth, not status. My life was quiet, stable, intentional. And I never, not once, wished my family had been part of it. The final attempt. On my 42nd birthday, a letter arrived at my office. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. I opened it anyway. It was from my father. Camilla, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. You became everything I failed to see in you. If you ever want to have dinner, I would like to try to rebuild what I broke. I'm dead. I read it once, then I shredded it. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Some bridges aren't burned. They were never built properly to begin with. The last update I didn't expect. 5 years later, another letter arrived. Not from my father, not from my mother, not even from Sarah. It was from Jackson. He was 18 now, accepted into a prestigious university, studying engineering, full scholarship. The letter was long, handwritten, precise, but the final paragraph stayed with me. I know you don't want a relationship with the family. I respect that. I just wanted you to know I'm the person I am because you saved my mom. Not financially, not medically, but because you showed me that breaking cycles is possible. I don't need anything from you. I just wanted to say thank you one last time. I sat with that letter in my hands for a long time. Then I folded it carefully, stored it in my desk, and, for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to smile about something connected to the Harrison bloodline. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just the knowledge that one good thing had come out of all the damage. One boy had grown up with honesty instead of manipulation, with humility instead of entitlement, with integrity instead of rot. Because I drew a boundary. Because I refused to repeat the patterns that had broken me. Because I chose justice over blood. The final reflection. Sometimes, late at night, I stand by my window overlooking the city lights and think about everything that happened. My parents wanted obedience. Sarah wanted my life. Jake wanted my connections. The world wanted a story. But I wanted something none of them valued. truth, peace, self-respect, and I got all three. Not by forgiving, not by reconciling, not by forgetting, but by refusing to bend, refusing to let the people who broke me decide how my life would unfold. In the end, the golden daughter tarnished. The disappointing daughter rose, and the truth, spoken at the right moment, in the right room, in front of the right people, destroyed everything that needed to fall. I didn't save my family. I saved myself. And sometimes, that's the only redemption a story needs.